my role in the community could be defined a couple different ways. Professionally, I'm a pastor and serve as pastor of community engagement at Boone UMC, and then also out at Blackburn's Chapel in Todd. But a lot of the work that we'll be sharing about today is connected to the work that I do through the church, but is also its own thing. And JB, I'll let you share some about your role and what we do.
My name is JB. About 10-ish years ago, I started a teen boys group in the trailer park where we live. And it has been on its own journey, especially lately as we try to figure out if there's anything that we can do in person and if there's anything that we can do virtually that's interesting and worthwhile. But yeah, there's a lot of different ways to describe kind of the group, but it's a group mentoring space for the kids that seeks to be empowering and celebrate the guys in the group for all of their gifts and to kind of build upon those. So yeah, about 10 years ago, started doing that, and so we have a lot of connections as well through our neighborhood. We have connections also through our neighborhood is very close to the homeless shelter, and we through relationships, kind of a combination of relationships and ministry things. We're also connected to someone who is formerly homeless. We'll talk a little bit about, but formerly homeless, who's now kind of a minister and a peer, sort of a peer support person at the hospitality house for those experiencing homelessness and for those addicted, formerly addicted, things like that. And so we're really connected to that ministry. So sort of indirectly or as a support system of that ministry and that as well. So it's a little bit about what we do.
Yeah, and our hope and our goal today is to share with you just some of what we feel like we've learned along our journey in striving to be that positive, consistent, supportive person in folks' lives. I think this quote is attributed to you, Denise, that one of the number one factors that offsets trauma is that consistent, caring adult presence or supportive presence, peer presence. And so, yeah, we're going to share some about, just what we've learned and how we have seen just sort of that everyday support help build resilience for folks who have experienced trauma and are trying to move forward from trauma. And so, as JB said, the way we live our lives, the community that we find ourselves in, we've got a lot of folks in our lives who are in various states of resiliency and trauma. And as many of y'all know, trauma is something that affects people at every socioeconomic level. This is not just an issue for folks who are living in poverty or living paycheck to paycheck, but when folks are living in poverty, it often means a lack of access to resources, economic resources, educational resources, health and mental health resources, and it adds both an additional layer of stress and takes away a lot of the buffers to stress. And so, as JB said, we live in Bradford Park. We have a lot of relationships with folks at Hospitality House, folks coming out of incarceration. And so that's the context that we're speaking from. But we hope that the things that we'll share today are things that can be applied in whatever context you find yourself in, whether that's your neighborhood with kids and adults that you know, maybe through your work, maybe through your leisure activities or your kids' activities, maybe through places you volunteer, or with coworkers or your own family members. And so we although we'll be sharing a lot of specific stories
And
to our context, we hope
and
that these can
there's
be kind of
tips in one of the cabinets
broadly
in there if you want, which I don't think
broadly
we've got
relevant, or
planned
that
yet.
you can draw and glean from them to whatever your context is. And we also want to make clear that, like, there's no requirement that anyone be perfect, that they be free from ACEs themselves, that they've never experienced trauma or anything like that. In fact, most of the people who we feel like we've learned the most from are people who have come from really hard backgrounds. They have overcome a tremendous amount of trauma, and they have built incredible resiliency. And so a lot of the people who inspire us the most are those folks who have built that resiliency and are building that in their own lives, and are who are trying to help build that in others. But it again doesn't, it's not just for one group of people to be helping another, but striving for mutuality. And so we also, just one other kind of disclaimer here at the beginning. Although we're talking today about trauma support outside of the professional setting, we do see that there's a huge need, and professional counseling, mental health resources, support groups, therapy, all of that is very needed. And in our relationships, we try to find ways to encourage folks, connect folks with those resources, so that they can get professional help. But we also know that folks need support outside of just the few hours a week that they might be able to be in counseling or be in a support group. And so that's kind of where we're coming from.
Let me ask you just one quick question, Laura.
Yeah.
I was gonna just only have y'all on the screen, but I think when I do that, y'all can't see my face. So if I only have you on the screen, is that all you can see is yourselves?
Right now I can see everyone.
Okay, but when it was just y'all, is that all y'all could see is just you? Or
I've been able to see everyone the whole time.
okay, so I might put you on speaker view for myself then. I just wanted you to be able to see my face and have some kind of feedback as you're going. And then I'm sure you're going to come back to this, but already just in a few minutes you've been talking, y'all mentioned several times strength-based and that type of thing. And so for social workers who are trained, I know we are in strengths, finding the strengths. So I hope you're going to have time to circle back around to that, because that's one of my really big things too as well. So if you don't come back to it, I might bring you back later. So
we're going to talk about that. Yes.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's not the first thing we're going to talk about, but it's maybe the second or third thing that we're going to talk about.
All right. Thank you.
So we, again, just want to share some stories of examples of how we've seen this trauma support outside the professional setting look like in our own lives. And we thought it might be helpful to kind of categorize this by some different virtues or practices that we found ourselves needing to cultivate in our lives in order to be able to love and support our friends and neighbors who've experienced trauma. And so the stories that we're going to share, we're not going to use people's names, but they're all people who are cherished friends, neighbors, people we actually consider like family. And again, we hope that in hearing our specific stories that it can resonate with how this might play out in your life and relationships. And at any time, please hop in with questions, with your own stories or lessons or examples. We would love for it to be a conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to JB to get us started with the first lesson and story.
Yeah, the first kind of theme, we were sort of trying to think through of like how we could make it more interesting, and I always resonate with stories. So we were trying to think through themes and based on stories and people. But a big theme that's stood out to us is seeing each other as family, or kind of a non-traditional family or a new family kind of thing. And here's what I mean. So that's the theme. But thinking about people as family, there is the minister and peer support. I don't know. He's not his position is as a lay minister in the church, but he also has been addicted, was formerly incarcerated, and post-release ended up homeless, he found great transformation through faith, and heard a calling to kind of give back and to minister back. And a big part of that was he was tired of losing friends to addiction. And we're really close and connected with this person. And we have a Monday through Friday Zoom call Bible study. And it would be often that we would see a face we didn't recognize, in his bedroom or living room, or hear a voice we didn't recognize, and we say, "Oh, who's that? Who you've got somebody visiting?" And he'll say, "Oh yeah, that's my brother so and so," or "Oh yeah, that's my mom, that's my mama." And you get to a point where only so many brothers and so many mamas can be possible. And for us, when you would ask him about, like, okay, so I mean, you're allowed to have as many moms as you want, I'm just curious, he would say, okay, well, she's not actually my mom, or she's not actually my brother, but, like, that's how I think about this person. And this kind of just, like, I was just chewing on this. And when you talk about strengths based, right, like, instead of looking at differences, looking at, like, okay, this is a person who is welcoming people into his small home as it is, so they can be safe and not have to be at the hospitality house while we're going through coronavirus because this person's immunocompromised, or just have a couple of days, they normally tent, whatever it is. This person's welcoming people into their homes, and he is seeing these people as family. And so then I ended up, it ended up changing the way I saw someone that I'd been in relationship with for years. This person has been an on again, off again neighbor, and has physical challenges. She's on disability, and a lot of emotional challenges. There's days where she calls me and she tells me that she's just been crying all day and just been trying to stop crying. She has a really extensive trauma background. And just the reality is, like, hearing about one story, it's easy for us. It can be easier for us to feel compassion, but I know if you're in a professional setting, or if you're in a setting where you have a lot of people in your life who are recovering from trauma, it can be hard to take all the phone calls, to answer all the knocks on the door, and just treat each of them with equal compassion. And so this idea of thinking about people as like family was really impactful for me in this relationship that I borrowed from our friend, because one day it just kind of hit me. She was calling what felt like a lot, and needed kind of a lot of talking, and I was feeling frustrated. I was feeling like I didn't have as much to give. And all of a sudden this idea popped in from our friend, like, what if you saw her as your mom? And that totally changed it for me somehow, like magically, seeing her as what if she was my mom? How would I treat her then? And it's not to say I have a warm and fuzzy relationship with my mom. I have many aces from my mom, but somehow, when we feel tempted to see someone as maybe needy, as clingy, or entitled to our help, or some other less desirable light, if we can think about this person as a brother, as a cousin, as a family member, if I found for me that it was really helpful. But I feel like families are places of imperfection, where flaws hang out, sometimes literally, like flaws are hanging out. And families are places where we know each other's strengths and we know each other's greatest weaknesses, and we accept and love each other despite these. And so I feel like thinking of somebody as, we might feel like, I don't owe this person anything. I'm at my end of my rope. We might feel like just exhausted, but somehow for me, thinking about somebody as my mama, thinking about somebody as my brother, thinking about somebody as my cousin, is like, if your family member calls and you need something, we're more often just to drop what we're doing and help, even if we don't have space, even if we don't have capacity. And so this idea of thinking about somebody as a family member, you know, these new families, different families, can sometimes, for me, it has been really helpful. And on that same theme, thinking about a young man who I mentored while he was a youth. Now he's in his mid-20s, but for 2 years he lived with me, finishing up high school and then a few years after that. And he always used to make the joke, because he had a bad relationship with his dad, that that I was like his dad, or that I was like a dad to him. But the tricky thing is, I'm only 7 years older than him. And so we would get in these stupid long arguments about like whether or not it was physically possible for me to be his dad, me saying, no, like it's not. And him saying, actually, yes, it is. And, but it got taken to another level when he lost his father and became a father in the same year.
Wow.
And we had a really serious conversation about, you know, what had kind of been playful joking. He said, like, I'm putting you and Laura down as the grandparents for my daughter. And from there, like, this young man that's sort of been like, I would normally, in my mind, if I was being completely honest, this is somebody I love, somebody I would, you know, take a bullet for, but honestly also somebody who annoys me to no end. And thinking about him as claiming me as a dad, and that his daughter was going to see me as her grandfather, even though I don't have any biological children, has been a transition for me. But it has opened up space in my life, opened up space in my heart, opened up space in my patience, for random phone calls. It's not just a random phone call about something I don't care about. This is a call from my son. This is a call from a son to his father. And thinking about reframing relationships in our minds can sometimes be really helpful. And the quote, one quote that's been really helpful for me, from Father Greg Boyle, in a book called Tattoos on the Heart, is he says, here's what we seek: a compassion that can stand in awe of what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment about how they carry it. And I think regardless of if we apply it to the poor, it applies to people recovering from trauma, that if we focus on what people have to carry instead of how they're carrying it, it's a lot easier for us to be more patient, to be amazed that they're still walking at all. You know, keeping in mind that people have had incredible challenges, and also some situations we don't know what those challenges are. You know, when we hear somebody's story, it can be really easy, or a lot easier, for us to have patience for them when we know what they've been through. But when you just see maybe the troubling behavior, or the frustrating behavior, or the acting out, and you don't know the story, it can be a lot. It can be a lot more challenging. And so, bearing that in mind, you know, I think that sort of standing in awe of what people have to carry instead of how they carry it, I think is a really important kind of theme or value. Another one is celebrating small victories. I feel like, you know, for me, I'm the type of person, just the way I grew up and the way I, you know, think about myself, and just life in general, is celebrating small victories is really hard for me. I'm more one of those people that's more like, keep going, don't focus on what's gone well, because then you're going to get stuck there. Keep focusing on what you don't have, and just keep pushing, just keep pushing. And I found that if you don't celebrate the small victories, one, you burn out, because, you know, it's just, you may never get to the big thing, the end goal or whatever. And it helps to change our mindset, to see the strengths, to see what it's like creating a ceremony, creating a ritual, creating a party or whatever, going out to eat, creating some sort of ceremonial pause where we just look at what's been done well. And almost every time it feels like a distraction to me. Just being 100% honest, it can feel like a waste of time to me. But I force myself to do this because I know that that if I only focus on the feedback of, hey, you could do this better, or why don't we try this next time, that's all I'm gonna see. I'm never gonna see this person's positive attributes, and they're gonna think that that's the way I see them, and they won't be wrong. And so going out of our way to celebrate small victories, and that's where relationships can be helpful. And when we're outside of a professional setting per se, like we might have more space and capacity or less boundaries around taking somebody in our car or whatever, to celebrate those kinds of things and see them. This could also include just like, sometimes we're going to talk about kind of boundaries and things like that, self-care in just a minute, but kind of taking the initiative on your time and when it's convenient for you and in ways that work for you to communicate that you're thinking about somebody can really help, as opposed to if you only react to a phone call, to a visit, to when somebody's making a request or a demand of your time or your attention. Maybe it's a phone call, maybe it's dropping a meal off, whatever. I mean, it could be a million different things depending on your relationship with the person and what's convenient for you, whatever. But I think that doing these small gestures of kindness that I'm thinking about you, when it works for you, can really help the person not to feel like they need to kind of reach out all the time to you because they know you're thinking about them as well. And another one last thing I'll say before I switch over to Laura is sometimes, and on that same similar theme, sometimes supporting the people who are doing well, that it's easy to feel like they don't need my support, they're fine. They don't need a celebration, they're fine. Maybe it's the person who's not calling you all the time. I feel like that can also help us to see the strengths in somebody. It's like a pause and to see somebody who is thriving or is building resiliency. And also, you just never know. Some people won't reach out before they crash, we had a few situations in the past couple of years, people that we thought were like rock solid, doing great in their recovery from addiction, and felt like we don't even need to check on this person. They're like in the clear, they're doing great. And then all of a sudden in jail, for a long time. And it just made me realize, like, man, we really, like, even the people who don't need things don't call. Like, we really need to like shower them with love and support as much as we can, because you never know what they're struggling with, and they might be just trying to hold it together.
So before I move on to a kind of a different topic, just wanted to pause for a second. If anyone has a example, something that resonated, a question that this brought to mind.
We don't have anything in the chat, but does anybody have something they'd like to say? We're all listening attentively. I'm taking notes.
Well, we'll keep moving, and again, feel free. Once we get on a roll, you might have to interrupt us, but please do interrupt us if we.
I interrupt for a couple of things.
Sure, Bill.
Okay, I just wanted to say, standing in awe of what people have to carry. What a great way to look at things. That was incredibly powerful. The family, treating them as family, thinking of them as family. Oh my gosh. And then finally, the last thing that you pointed out, even people that aren't having problems or seem to be just smooth sailing, that's critical to look after them. And that really helps me, because I fall into that boat where I just stop worrying about them. I stop connecting because they're good. But that was really helpful for me. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Bill.
The other thing I loved about that, y'all, was I think so many of us, especially with high ACEs scores, may come from a family where there was a lot of trauma. And so the idea that you get to create your own families and you get to call them whatever you want,
Yeah.
I think is really powerful and empowering. And so I've always, said that I define my family on my own terms, and it's not necessarily that traditional definition, but I really love that because it does give you that freedom to identify people based on the strength of the connection and not necessarily the biological connection.
Yeah.
So I like that too. Rebecca?
I hate to buddy. I know I'm late, but apparently I missed something very critical. Would you repeat the section about you stand in awe of what they're having to deal with? I need to hear that because I see so many people that are they're just dealing with terrible traumas that are coming to my court, and I really would love that. So what was it again?
And we actually put it in the chat, Laura and JB, because we all loved it so much. And so the actual quote,
there.
Yeah.
it says, go ahead, JB.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it is a great book that it comes from, Tattoos on the Heart, and I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, the idea that it's so much easier for us to just see sort of what we would call the problems, to what we would call the acting out, what we would call what bothers us, the problem that may bring them to our door, and just to see somebody in terms of that, or what continues to bring them, and to feel like, they are this problem, instead of either, a lot of times we don't know what somebody's been through, and that's what makes it so hard, right? Is if you were there and you saw what happened to this child, you would be amazed that they're still walking at all. You'd be amazed that they're still trying, that they're still doing as well as they are. I think, for me, I can say for a lot of personal stories, I don't know how sometimes people can get up each morning and not just lay in bed all day. And so so the image in my mind is just standing in awe of what people have to carry, and not necessarily how they're carrying it. And sometimes we don't know, but what the research is showing us is, even if we don't know the specifics of what people have been through, certain circumstances in their life, for instance, if they're at the hospitality house, I think it's like 98% have a significant ACE score. If for our folks who are in and out of jail consistently, a lot of times, the statistics are really high. And so what the statistics are helping us is to, when we learn personal stories that really touch us and move us, but we don't know somebody's specific story, the research hopefully can help us to imagine, I don't know what happened, but I know something happened, because things keep happening in your life, that can't stop. And so I don't know if that was what you were hoping for, if that was enough there, but.
Well, I really appreciate it. And I wrote this down, and I will keep it with me in my book, because when I'm on the bench, sometimes I just have little things that help inspire when you're having a tough time. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I hate to, I cut in late, and I'm going to have to cut out early, but I just wanted
you got what you needed. So
I got the tidbit I needed right here. So thank you so much. I hope y'all have a great day. So sorry to disrupt everything, but that's usually what I do. Y'all take care. Bye.
Thank you.
You too. Thanks.
I wanted to add one thing to that, then I'll let y'all keep talking, and that is, when we're doing our compassionate schools training, and this is one of Candace's favorite things, but teachers often say, I need a list. I need a checklist. I need to know, what are the symptoms? What are the red flags? And we talk all the time about, you need to treat everyone as if, because we don't know who comes from trauma or what their trauma is, and does it really matter? We all need to treat each other compassionately, and that kind of falls in with what you're saying, is we can't know everybody's story, so we just need to assume and treat each person compassionately across the board. And that way, the people who haven't had a hard time still will benefit, and the people who have will benefit as well. So that's what that reminded me of. But thank you for diverting for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we did want to spend some time talking about how we do build on people's strengths, on people's interests, on their gifts. And here wanted to just share a couple of practical examples of what that's looked like for us. So most recently during these COVID times, typically JB and I both have groups of teenagers that we're meeting with in person. We're going in a van, picking them all up, and spending time weekly in that kind of group setting and checking in with folks in person. And we haven't been able to do that in the last many months. And so we've had to shift how do we continue to try to offer support even beyond just being on Zoom calls, sending text messages, things like that. And so one of the things that's looked like is we had a couple of folks from the community who randomly dropped off some money saying like, hey, like, use this for the kids. And so we were able to, JB fixed up 3 bikes for 3 of his guys to be able to just go out and ride bikes on the Greenway. One of them could use it to get to work, but even more just like to go on a bike ride together, socially distanced, hopefully outside. For some of the kids, it was buying them climbing shoes, or fishing equipment, or dropping off some art supplies to some of my girls, just trying to find ways that even when we couldn't be together doing those groups, and again, we are doing some, virtual presence together, but even beyond that, how do we make sure they've got some tools, some resources, some like equipment to be able to pursue things that they're passionate about, or just healthy activities that they want to do and that they're able to do when they're stuck at home, and not getting to go out all the places that they're used to going. Another story that came to mind for me was several years ago. This was actually before JB and I were married. His guys would be coming over to his house all the time, and he would notice that his guitar was kind of moving place, like it would be on the couch and then they'd come over and then it'd be over here, and he'd notice them just like they didn't know how to play the guitar or just kind of messing around on the guitar trying to plunk a few notes or something, and
make a racket is what they were doing.
And so what started out as sort of an annoyance of like, why are these guys always messing with my guitar and they don't even know how to play it, then became an opportunity to, there was another community member, Kyle Sigmund, some of y'all know Kyle, who then like had reached out about wanting to offer guitar lessons. And so then that became an opportunity for these guys who clearly like they were always picking up the guitar, and to see in that, even though they never said, I want to learn how to play the guitar, teach me how to play the guitar, just to see like maybe that's an interest that they have. And just really appreciate how like JB noticed that as something that, hey, I think maybe these guys would like to play guitar, and then had another community member offer. And so for several months they did guitar lessons, and then these guys are now very excellent guitar players, and even like trying to teach others to play. And it's been, again, in this time of isolation, a great outlet to be able to have that musical therapy, really. That's something they can do on their own to be able to just, again, have a healthy kind of outlet. Did you have anything else you wanted to add about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just speaks to like, instead of seeing somebody for the problem, the racket that they're making with your guitar, or not knowing where your guitar is in your own house, those are the symptoms, right? That can be frustrating. But when you look at it as like, wow, like there's some interest here, like that, even if they don't have any clue what they're doing, there's some interest. And looking for an opportunity to develop a skill out of an interest. It's like, if you're looking for strengths in a child, like kids have had no time, and kids from a lot of, from our neighborhood and similar neighborhoods haven't had a lot of opportunities. And so a desire sometimes, a disguised desire, a desire that can even be disguised as something that's frustrating to an adult, can really be one of the greatest strengths that a kid has.
I like that. That's a really good positive reframe of, instead of viewing it as a problem, views it opportunity to connect. And so I wrote that down.
So we're gonna shift one more time, and the last couple of, I guess, sort of lessons that we've learned, I feel like have more to do with the internal work that we've had to do. I mean, all of these have been internal shifts, but these are more like kind of, yeah, our own work that is hopefully helping, as we're doing it, make us better able to support people we're in relationship with. And so one of those has to do with boundaries, and both like boundaries from a self-care angle, but also like helping, just helping establish what are healthy boundaries. And so kind of the story that goes with this is a neighbor, actually now a former neighbor, but someone I'm still connected to, who is an older adult, disabled. She and her husband are not able to get out of their house hardly at all. Even before COVID, they don't have transportation. They pretty much are confined to their home all the time. And so early on, after I got to know this person, she would always, like, felt like every day, hey, can you come over and visit with me? Hey, can you run me to the store? Hey, can you pick up this for me from the store? Hey, like, literally it felt like every day I was being asked to do something. And so, and was, you know, feeling, had to say no a lot of the times, but wanted to figure out a way to have a conversation with her about, like, okay, I want to support you, but I cannot every day come spend a lot of time together and take you to the store every single day. And so we talked and we came up with this idea that, like, there would be a set aside time each week. Wednesday and Sunday afternoons, if you need something, I can take you to the store then. We could just spend some time visiting, whatever. That will be your time, your time with me, my time with you. We will do it in these kind of set times. And outside of that, like, it needs to be an emergency if you're asking me to take you somewhere, because let's proactively plan ahead what these things that you might need, because often it would be presented as, this is an emergency, I don't have any food in my house, can you take me to the store? And then I go over there, it's like, there's actually a lot of food, it's just not what you want to be eating, which is fine. But if I'm dropping everything I'm doing because you told me you had no food, then I was finding myself feeling frustrated about that. And so yeah, through that conversation and that new arrangement, we're able to, like, come to a healthier place and hear each other. And I think that's been one of the things that, that I'm continuing to grow in. But I have this desire to want to be able to help everyone and do everything that anyone wants me to do, which is not a healthy way to live. But to be able to like grow in confidence of saying, like, no, these are the things that I can do, and to find out that, like, she was grateful for that. That worked out totally fine for her. She didn't actually need me to do it every single day, but if she knew that there was going to be some time that we would be able to spend together, or that I would be able to help her do something, that sort of satisfied both of us, and it kept me from feeling overwhelmed, like I had to always be feeling bad for saying, no, I can't help you.
Laura, what I love about that is that some of us, I was probably 45 before I was comfortable setting decent boundaries. And so for people who aren't comfortable setting boundaries for themselves, to be able to view it as, we need to be teaching the people around us healthy boundaries as well. And maybe we can start with that and then grow comfortable in our own ability for setting boundaries for ourselves, because sometimes we can do for other people what we can't do for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And so I really like that reference point of, even if you're not yet comfortable setting a boundary for yourself, you need to be setting them for others, because they need to learn healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
So I really like that frame of reference.
Yeah. And and it is something, like, that conversation that I had with that person was probably 2 years ago. And as I was thinking about this today, I realized that kind of moving into the more self-care boundaries, like last night, actually got a phone call, and I knew that if I answered the phone, I was just going to be grumpy and I'd probably snap at this person and be annoyed, and that would not be helpful to them, and could potentially be hurtful. And so, just like giving myself permission to say, sorry, I'm too tired to talk tonight. Still texted and sent, an encouraging word and said, I'll be able to talk tomorrow afternoon. But yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes it does, for those of us who are, I don't know, I guess people pleasers, or people who are better at able to take care of others than ourselves, sometimes that starting with that external boundary can be helpful.
Then the next kind of virtue theme is patience. And I know that's like, oh, that's sort of just like telling somebody, just be patient, oh, wow, okay, very wow. But, it kind of just needs to be said that that it is just one of those things. We have to have patience. We have to learn patience. In the church, we have an expression, don't pray for patience, because God's going to give you someone to teach you patience. And and I think it's one of those situations that you can look at it. You have a lot of people in your life trying to teach you patience. The more folks, recovering from trauma, gaining their resiliency, it's a great opportunity to become a very patient person. And one of the things that helps me kind of, to reiterate, but one of the things that kind of helps is to imagine the hurt child, right? Is like, if you find yourself frustrated that someone who is not a child is exhibiting childish behaviors, or is exhibiting childish behaviors that are not age appropriate, then that should be like a signal to us of a hurt child, and I just feel like it's way easier for me to imagine to gain patience for like a wounded 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old than it is for like a 50-year-old or even a 15-year-old, right? It's just, they're not as cute anymore. They're still attractive human beings, but they're not cute. But the thing is, like, when we remember, if we can kind of get a picture of this child in our minds, I don't know, I think it triggers something. It triggers some compassion, some maternal, paternal instinct in us, where parental instinct, where we're like, protect this child. Well, someone didn't protect this child, or this child was in a situation. And so, that's one of those things for me. And just the reality is like, we have to accept our own imperfection, and that kind of relates to some of the boundaries. Sometimes we don't create boundaries because we tell ourselves, well, if I was a more patient person, I would do this. Or if I was a more compassionate person, I would do this. If I was a better person, I would do this thing that I don't actually want to do right now. And I hear you. I mean, we can challenge ourselves to grow and become better, depending on where we're at with that sort of mentality. However, sometimes for the sustainability of your lifestyle, if you have a person you're walking alongside, sometimes we have to just admit our imperfections, admit our weaknesses. Sometimes we will mess up. We have to apologize. Goodness sakes, there are a few things that are harder for me than to say sorry to somebody that I feel like I'm trying to help. When you feel like you're in the helper role and you have to apologize, that's a really humbling thing, but really necessary, just to accept. We talked about thinking about someone as family can help us to accept them. Well, sometimes thinking about them as family can help us to accept ourselves in that moment, that like, your family is the person who sees it all hang out and still is in relationship with you and loves you. So, patience with ourselves as well, that in order to be that person for somebody who can support, you don't have to be perfect, but the consistency and the positivity is important.
Someone said in the chat that was really helpful for them to think about, a good observation, that what a person may be showing in terms of childlike behavior may be what helped them survive when they were a child. So
right.
That resonated with someone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing, JB, I loved what you said about a person we walk alongside. And as I've been thinking more about strength-based language, and it occurs to me that the language that we use that is more respectful and compassionate tends to take a longer time to say.
Yeah.
And so I think it's partially laziness that, like, yeah, they're homeless or whatever it is. It's just a quicker, easier way to say things. And so even though that takes a little while to say, a person that we're walking alongside, to me, that is such a powerful, leveler, that you're not just talking about us and them anymore, but that you're on a journey together, walking together. So I really like that.
Yeah. And on that point, another really quotable quote from Father Greg Boyle is, there's no us and them, just us. And I feel like that's kind of embodies in a short, concise way a lot of what we're talking about with family and walking alongside.
One more thing from the chat is that somebody said, humility always precedes patience. So saying sorry is very difficult, but it may be the only genuine apology that someone has ever received. And that's powerful.
Yeah. And like, even if you have to tell yourself, I'm going to apologize, not because I did something wrong, or because there are circumstances a person may perceive that you did something wrong and you may not, but just to teach somebody to see what an apology looks like. In our most condescending moments, we may feel like, I don't owe this person apology, but if you can rationalize your mind or twist your own mental arm into thinking, okay, this person doesn't deserve an apology, but I'm just going to give them an apology so they can see what an apology looks like. Yeah, I think that however we have to get ourselves to do it.
Yeah, humility. You have to get there by several different routes. Thank you for that.
And that ties into the last two short stories that I wanted to share, that both have to do with releasing control and realizing that we always don't know what the best outcome is going to be for someone. And I think, that can be hard, especially if if we have more education, if we have greater privilege in society, than a person we're walking alongside. That can be easy to think, I know how your life needs to be. But we don't, and even if we think we do, we don't really have a right to tell someone how they should or need to live their lives. And so I think about someone that was my roommate for a short period of time, and this was someone who was trying to start their life over, and I was trying to offer support as they were kind of getting a fresh start. And this person had also overcome a lot of trauma, and it was really hard for me at times to not feel like I had more of a vested interest in their future success than she seemingly did. And so again, had to find myself doing that inner work, and it was actually beginning to attend some Al-Anon meetings, and to hear from other folks who had people close to them that were overcoming addiction and substance use issues, that began to help me realize that just because someone was living under my roof, that I had some right or capability to control them, or to say the decisions they should make, their goals and dreams. And so it really required kind of a letting go of what I thought was best for this person. And we still talked about, we still had honest conversations where, I would try to hold up a mirror to things that the person had said themselves that they wanted their future to be. But ultimately to again release control of that, and let go of what I thought was best for her and her family, and that meant that eventually she was able to claim her own path forward. There were some bumps along the road, but the place that she eventually ended up wasn't anything didn't look anything like what I thought her best life would look like, but she it's what she wanted. And so still trying to encourage and support her in that. And kind of in a different way, one other story is just that sometimes we don't know when that consistent relationship will make a difference, or what kind of difference it will make. And so think of a youth who I was close to for many years. And this was someone who had a difficult home life, and we were doing everything we could to try to keep her involved in activities that we were doing and just be that consistent, supportive presence. And at the time, it seemed like just trying to help her have the best mental health that she could, given her circumstances. And again, didn't really know what would be the outcome of all this. But then eventually there's a situation, and she now is adopted into a family where she's really thriving. And so we never foresaw that like our being in her lives would have any role in that kind of change in her life. We were just trying to help her be resilient and to have stable relationships through a difficult home life, but then ended up that now she's in this family where she's thriving, and honestly like doesn't need as much support from us as she once did. And we're grateful for that in a way.
Yeah, I mean, the way I don't know if we put that, if we gave that theme a title, it might be like stick-to-itiveness or whatever, like we didn't know that one time we were going to pick her up, go out of our way and get her from 30 minutes away from our house to take her on that one trip, that was going to be the time that made a huge impact. And she ended up, going into foster care. Like we didn't know that. But when you're in a kid's life, that's the power in that consistency, is like, you don't know what's going to make an impact, when the planets are just going to align. But when you're in a person's life for long enough, then some things can happen. I'll try to move through the last couple ones real quick, so that if we want to have a little bit extra time, Q&A or whatever. I think tough love kind of relates to boundaries. And I think along with tough love, it's sort of like, it's sort of like the make space, take space sort of thing. Like if you're eager to show tough love, then maybe be a little bit slower to show tough love, even as important as it is. And if you're less inclined, try to take some more tough love. But I think that however you use tough love, it's not just important to use it, but to use it wisely, and when you use it and how you use it. I think tolerance for a lack of gratitude is a pretty solid one. We talked about that, being willing to be human, and the goal is to invite people, depending on their age and depending on the circumstances, but the goal is mutual relationships. And one way I heard it said really, really well, all the Catholics are getting all the credit today. This was from Thomas Merton, but he essentially said, you're not loving somebody if you're not inviting them to a mutual relationship. Because a mutual relationship is the greatest thing. True love is mutual. And if you're not inviting someone into a mutual relationship, you're not loving them. And when I read that, I was like, oh my gosh, like he just broke through the barrier for me, because it just felt like setting boundaries didn't feel like love. Didn't feel like showing somebody love because of my paradigm of love. But when I thought about it as, I'm trying to help this person and myself enter into a mutual relationship, and that is the best thing. That is healthy love. That's the greatest gift. So I'm actually showing them the most love I could ever be showing them. And anyways, so hopefully maybe that will help somebody else out there. I needed that. And just realizing that we can't help everybody with everything all the time. But if we can help one way, for instance, like I have a guy who's a few years younger than me, come from extensive trauma background. When I met, he was unhoused, and now through hospitality houses, services, and support, he is housed. And for me, I was his transportation need guy and not free Uber. That did happen sometimes, but he was asking for enough rides. I was like, okay, I'm going to try to work myself out of a job in this situation. I'm going to get you a bike. And then we upgraded to a moped. And then we upgraded to a car for a brief second. Then we downgraded back to the bike. And we're still at the bike, you know? And whatever his situation is, instead of, you know, it's like, this person's calling me. I'm frustrated because I need to give them a ride. It's always inconvenient, blah, blah, blah. Well, how can I work myself out of a job, right? How can I help this person become their own hero or meet their own need? Well, let's get him a bike. Let's get him a moped. Let's work on a car with how much money he has with his budget or whatever. And so you may not be able to help with every need for every person all the time, but even if you just pick one thing, I'm the transportation person for this. If they need help with the transportation or I don't know what it could be, I'm going to be the person that when they get fired, I'm going to be the person to help them get a job, you know, whatever. And then it can kind of help you create boundaries around your involvement in their life. And how do you want to?
Yeah, so we realized that we were at our hour, and that's probably more stories than you wanted to hear from us. But we imagine that y'all have people in your lives that maybe came to mind as folks who you're already trying to support, or maybe someone who came to mind like, oh, maybe I should, or I want to reach out to this person. If you're looking for ways to enter into relationships to support, we wanted to give a shameless plug for Western Youth Network and their mentoring program, because that's a great resource that we have in our community, and a great a great opportunity to be able to build significant relationships with young people in our community that can really offset some of the trauma that they may be experiencing. But of course, you know, things you're already involved in, your neighborhood, your church, your child scout troops. There are lots of ways to build these relationships. And we just wanted to close with saying, you know, there is this evidence that being a consistent, caring adult does make a difference. But also to acknowledge that it doesn't always have the effect that we want it to, that it doesn't always look how we think it's going to look on the timeline we think it's going to be. We want just like this perfect upward trajectory for folks, and in reality it's a lot of ups and downs, and it can feel sometimes tempting to get discouraged when we see someone we care about making decisions that we think aren't the best decisions for them, or continuing in unhealthy relationships. But again, it's not our place to say that and or to, you know, make their decisions for them. And for us, like, we have found that community is one of the most important things, like for us also receiving support. And so being able to, you know, whether that's our faith community and drawing on resources from our faith, other friends and colleagues who are trying to do similar work. And then WCCI has been a huge resource for us, and just being able to learn and connect. And so if you're new to WCCI, we hope that you'll stay connected. And ultimately, like, we have to do this out of resilient love, and to draw from a deep well of love ourselves. And so we're grateful to be a part of a community that has so much to offer, and such a great community. And
I want to read y'all just a few things from the chat. People are signing off if they need to, but there's a whole lot of thanks so much. This is great. So glad you're in our community. Light bulbs came on for me. Somebody said, I hope you're recording this. It will be recorded, and it'll be on our website. And that Maggie Farrington adores you. Lots of us do. That you're rock stars. Thank you for all you do for our community. Candace put a link to Western Youth Network, and then Charlene put a link to volunteer applications. And thanks for all the wisdom, and don't apologize for the stories. Your work and your words are lovely gifts. So thanks so much. The last thing I want to say was, one of the things I wrote down that you said, JB, was, how can I help you become your own hero? And I have a mug on my desk that said she needed a hero, and so she became one.
There you go.
So, yeah, that reminded me of that. Thank you so much. This is definitely the highlight of my day, and possibly my week, and maybe since we've come back to school. So I really appreciate y'all sharing with us and taking time to be with us. It's good to see you and to hear some of your stories and your wisdom. So thank you, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Cool. Thanks, y'all.
All right. Take good care.
You too.